The Galactic Council's warning. The grand halls of the Galactic Council shimmered with golden light, reflecting off the polished floors. Alien diplomats of every shape and size filled the massive chamber, their voices a low hum as they discussed the day's agenda. At the center of the room, under the great symbol of the United Galactic Alliance, stood the human delegation. 3 individuals from Earth, facing the powerful rulers of the galaxy. Chancellor HFY, a towering reptilian being from the Zark Dominion, stepped forward. His yellow eyes gleamed with arrogance as he looked down at the humans. "Earth is once again causing trouble," he hissed. "Your people are unpredictable, aggressive, and dangerous. The Council must decide what to do about your reckless species." The other Council members murmured in agreement. Humanity had always been different from the other species in the galaxy. They came from a death world, a planet so hostile that only the strongest, most adaptable creatures could survive. Unlike the peaceful, long-lived species of the Council, humans had evolved through struggle, war, and hardship. Ambassador Ryan Carter, the lead representative of Earth, remained calm. His sharp blue eyes scanned the room, taking in the condescending stares from the alien delegates. He had been expecting this. The Council had always feared humanity's unpredictable nature. "With all due respect," Ryan said in a steady voice, "Earth has followed the Council's rules. We have not attacked anyone. We have not violated any treaties." HFY let out a low growl. "Your colonies expand too quickly. Your technology advances too fast. You are not like the rest of us. You do not belong in this council." A murmur of agreement swept through the chamber. The other species, some with insect-like bodies, others with glowing crystalline forms, nodded in approval. Ryan remained silent for a moment, letting the weight of their words settle. Then, with a measured breath, he spoke again. "So, what exactly are you suggesting?" A new voice cut through the chamber, cold and sharp. It belonged to High Minister Yalara of the Valeri Union, a tall, silver-skinned humanoid with piercing violet eyes. "We believe Earth must be controlled," she said. "Your military should be dismantled, your warships decommissioned, and your colonies placed under Council supervision." Ryan's hands curled into fists at his sides, but his face remained unreadable. He could feel the eyes of his team on him, waiting, expecting him to respond with diplomacy. But deep inside, a storm was brewing. Earth had always known that the Council feared them, but now they were openly threatening humanity's future. He took a step forward, his voice calm but firm. "We have never started a war," he said, his words carrying a quiet strength. "But if you push us, if you try to take our freedom, you will regret it." The room fell silent. Some of the Council members exchanged uneasy glances, others scoffed. HFY sneered. "You dare threaten us, human?" Ryan shook his head. "No, I am warning you." There was a long pause before Yalara spoke again, her voice laced with condescension. "You should be careful with your words, Ambassador Carter. The Council does not take kindly to threats. Perhaps it is time we teach your people a lesson." Ryan exhaled slowly, forcing himself to remain composed. "Earth does not seek war," he said, "but we are not afraid of it either." The meeting ended shortly after, but the tension in the air remained heavy. As the human delegation walked out of the Council hall, one of Ryan's aides whispered, "They're going to come for us, aren't they?" Ryan didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, "and they have no idea what they're about to start." The stars shimmered like tiny specks of ice in the vast darkness of space. A lone human scout ship, Horizon, drifted near the outer edge of the Sol system, patrolling the sector as part of Earth's early warning defense grid. The crew inside was calm, going through routine scans, unaware that their lives were about to change forever. Lieutenant Mark Harris sat in the command chair, his boots propped lazily against the console. "Same old routine," he muttered. "Nothing but empty space." Ensign Lay chuckled. "You sound disappointed, hoping for pirates." Mark smirked. "Not pirates, just something interesting." His wish came true seconds later. The ship's proximity alarms screamed to life. The screens flashed red, showing multiple unidentified vessels emerging from warp space. They were massive, dark, and unmistakably alien. Contact. Multiple warships detected, bearing 187 Mark 12, shouted the sensor officer. Oh God, they're Velari ships. The crew froze. The Velari Union, one of the most powerful members of the Galactic Council. They had always looked down on humanity, but they had never openly attacked. Until now. Get me Earth Command. Now. Mark barked. Before the comms officer could respond, a deep, inhuman voice crackled through the ship's speakers. This is High Warlord Tyrax of the Velari Union. Your planet is in violation of Galactic Council mandates. Surrender your vessel immediately, or be destroyed. Mark's pulse quickened. He looked at the main screen. Dozens of Velari warships now surrounded them. He knew what this was. An invasion. He took a breath, then responded, his voice steady. This is Lieutenant Mark Harris of the Terran Defense Fleet. We are on a lawful patrol in sovereign space. You are the ones trespassing. A deep guttural laugh came through the comms. Foolish human, you were warned. Now, you will learn. The transmission cut off. And then, without another word, the Velari fleet opened fire. The horizon shook violently as energy blasts tore through its shields. Sparks erupted from the consoles, and the crew struggled to stay on their feet. We're outmatched, Lai shouted. We need to retreat. Mark gritted his teeth. He wanted to fight, but they were only a scout ship, not built for combat against an entire fleet. Engage emergency warp drive. Now, he commanded. The Horizon's engines roared to life as it attempted to escape, but just before it could jump, a Velari destroyer fired a disruptor missile straight into their aft engines. The ship lurched violently, throwing Mark from his chair. The alarm screeched. Warp drive offline. We're dead in the water, the helmsman yelled. The crew braced for the finishing blow. The Velari ships closed in, weapons charging for the final strike. Mark clenched his fists. So this is how it ends. But just as the enemy was about to deliver the killing shot, something happened. A new signal burst across the system. It was strong, direct, and unmistakably human. To all Velari ships, this is Earth Command. You have fired upon Terran forces without provocation. You have made a grave mistake. For the first time, the Velari fleet hesitated. Their scanners picked up something enormous moving through space. Then, one by one, massive warships began appearing from the void. Sleek, dark, and armed to the teeth, the Terran Navy had arrived. Aboard the Velari flagship, Warlord Tyrax narrowed his glowing violet eyes. This was not how he had expected things to go. The humans should have been defenseless. But here they were, appearing out of nowhere, their warships looking lethal. A new voice entered the comms, this time with undeniable authority. You wanted war. The voice was cold, calculated. Now you'll see how Deathworlders fight. The void of space trembled as the Earth fleet appeared in full force, their enormous warships spreading out in tight formations. Their hulls gleamed under the dim light of distant stars, sleek and deadly. These ships weren't like anything the Velari had ever seen before. The humans had been underestimated, and now the galaxy would bear witness to their true strength. Mark Harris, still clinging to his seat after the brutal attack, could hardly believe what was happening. The Horizon was limping, its systems damaged, but there was a new hope now. The Velari, once so confident in their power, now found themselves facing an adversary they hadn't prepared for. Lieutenant Harris, Earth Command just opened up a comm channel, the comms officer said, his voice shaky. Mark's heart raced as he straightened in his seat, brushing the dust from his uniform. Put it through. The screen flickered, and the face of Admiral Susan Drake appeared. She was a woman known for her ice-cold demeanor, and her words now carried the weight of an entire species' future. "Lieutenant Harris, your survival is the first step in a message we intend to deliver to the Velari Union. You are not alone. The full force of the Terran fleet is now in position to engage." Mark couldn't suppress a smile. The Admiral's calm voice was the first true reassurance he had heard since the attack began. The Velari had made a grave mistake, and now Earth was ready to remind them just how dangerous humanity could be when pushed too far. Behind Admiral Drake, the star streaks of distant galaxies whirled past. But in the void of space between them, the massive fleet was forming a defensive perimeter around Earth's ships. The once dominant Velari vessels now found themselves outnumbered and surrounded. "We're going to show them what humanity is capable of," Mark muttered to himself, barely able to contain the rising anger and excitement. The tactical officer's voice cut in. "Sir, the enemy fleet is still charging their weapons. They haven't backed off yet." Mark quickly scanned the monitors. The Velari ships, despite their overwhelming size and advanced technology, looked uncertain. Their weapons were charging, but the hesitation in their movements was palpable. They had expected humans to fold, not retaliate with such force. He stood up and gripped the edge of the console. "Tell Earth Command to prepare the fleet for a full engagement. We need to send them a message they'll never forget. We're not just going to defend. We're going to strike hard." As Mark gave the orders, the other ships in the fleet moved into position. The Velari, sensing the shift in power, seemed to hesitate again. The once jovial warlord Tyrax, who had laughed earlier at humanity's outdated technology, now found his thoughts clouded with doubt. "Commander, what's going on?" Tyrax growled, his fists clenched in frustration. He turned to his officers, demanding answers. Why are they not retreating? Why haven't they scattered? The officer closest to him, a young Velari strategist, spoke cautiously. "Sir, it seems Earth has been holding back. This may be a trap." Tyrax scoffed, unwilling to accept this. "A trap? By these primitives? You dare suggest that our entire fleet could be outmaneuvered by humans?" The strategist didn't answer. He knew better than to argue with the warlord, but the suspicion had taken root. Meanwhile, back aboard the human fleet's flagship, the Vanguard, Admiral Drake was already orchestrating a devastating counterattack. The Vanguard was equipped with experimental quantum torpedoes, a secret weapon that could cut through the thickest armor of the Velari warships. The fleet was prepared to show the Velari that their technology wasn't the only power in the universe. "Admiral, the enemy fleet is preparing to open fire," the tactical officer warned. "They've locked onto the Vanguard." Drake's eyes narrowed, but she remained calm. "Let them fire. Our shields will hold. Once they fire, we'll give them a taste of human resilience." The Velari ships opened fire, sending a barrage of energy blasts toward the Vanguard. The shields flared bright with the energy impact, but they held. The human ships, long underestimated by the Velari, had been designed for this moment, to withstand the very weapons the Velari thought would annihilate them. "Now," Admiral Drake commanded, her voice unwavering. The Vanguard fired first. A massive energy beam shot from its main cannon, a beam so intense that it left a streak of white-hot light behind it. The beam slammed into the nearest Velari warship, tearing through its shields and punching a hole clean through its hull. The Velari ship exploded in a burst of fire and debris. The shockwave rocked the remaining Velari fleet, sending them into chaos. The other human ships followed suit, launching their own coordinated attacks. Humanity was fighting back, and they weren't pulling any punches. The Velari, caught off guard by the sheer force of the human counteroffensive, scrambled to regroup. But it was already too late. The human fleet was too well coordinated, too relentless. Mark stood at the helm of the horizon, watching the battle unfold before him. The adrenaline was pumping through his veins, but he knew they couldn't stop now. The Velari had dared to attack Earth, and it was time to make them regret it. "Captain Harris," a voice crackled from the communications panel. "We've got a new update from Earth Command. They're reporting that the Velari fleet is falling back. Our strike was effective. A sense of triumph surged through Mark. The Velari had tried to crush them, to show humanity that they were nothing more than insects. But now it was the Velari who were feeling the sting of human wrath. "They're not going to retreat," Mark said with a smile. "Not when we're just getting started." The battlefield was a chaotic dance of light and shadows. The once dominant Velari fleet, which had roared into the skies with such confidence, was now reeling, its ships scattering in confusion. But Mark Harris knew better than to let his guard down. The Velari were not so easily defeated, and if history had taught humanity anything, it was that the enemy would always find a way to strike back when least expected. He stood at the bridge of the horizon, his eyes scanning the holographic displays, watching as the Velari ships attempted to regroup. The vast emptiness of space stretched out before him, a cold, unforgiving void. And yet, in this void, humanity had found its fury, its ability to strike like a vengeful force of nature. "We've got incoming," the tactical officer said, breaking Mark from his thoughts. He turned sharply, his fingers gripping the edge of the control panel as the first signs of the counterattack came into view. The Velari weren't retreating. They were regrouping, reorganizing their forces, preparing for an even more devastating assault. This time, they were not going to underestimate humanity again. "Bring up the fleet's battle plan," Mark ordered. The holographic map expanded before him, showing the position of each human warship in the fleet. The once scattered formations were now tightening, merging into a coordinated defensive line, as Earth's fleet prepared for the inevitable next wave of fire. Admiral Susan Drake's face appeared on the main screen. Her expression was grim, but there was a spark of determination in her eyes. Humanity had crossed a threshold. Now there was no turning back. "We've got reports of enemy reinforcements on the way," she said, her voice steady but firm. "The Velari aren't just calling for backup. They've activated their deep space carriers. This will be their last attempt to crush us. They'll throw everything they have at us now." Mark nodded. He had expected this. The Velari wouldn't just roll over and accept defeat. They had far too much pride, far too much arrogance. But humanity, for the first time in centuries, had the element of surprise. And that was an advantage they couldn't afford to waste. "All ships, prepare for evasive maneuvers," Mark commanded. "We hold the line. No matter what comes next, we stand our ground." His words hung in the air as the bridge crews sprang into action. The lights above flickered as the ship's systems prepared for the coming onslaught. The Horizon, though damaged from the earlier attack, was still a formidable vessel, its reinforced hull capable of withstanding even the heaviest fire the Velari could throw at it. But the Horizon wasn't the only weapon humanity had at its disposal. Admiral Drake's fleet was about to unleash a secret weapon. Mark had only been briefed on it in the most minimal terms, something about experimental technology. But now was the moment. The Velari had played their hand. Now humanity would play theirs. This was their answer to the Velari's arrogance, a weapon designed to neutralize their superior technology. He turned to his weapons officer. "Activate the quantum disruptors." The officer hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. "Aye, sir. Disruptors are online." Mark took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. The quantum disruptors were a new form of weapon, created with the sole purpose of disabling enemy technology on a massive scale. The theory was simple. If the Velari relied so heavily on their advanced tech, then disrupting it could turn the tide of battle. And now, they were about to see if that theory held up. Outside, the void of space seemed to stretch infinitely. Then, without warning, the first wave of Velari ships came into view. Their silhouettes appeared like dark shadows against the backdrop of distant stars. Mark watched as the Velari fleet reformed, bringing in their reinforcements. Their massive ships loomed closer, their weapons charging with the familiar hum of deadly energy. They were ready to unleash hell. "Brace for impact," Mark muttered to himself. The first volley of Velari fire erupted into the space around them, Plasma bolts shot out like streaks of light, but the horizon was ready. Its shields flared brightly as the blasts hit, absorbing the energy, though some still managed to break through, causing the ship to rock violently. "Shields holding," the tactical officer called out. "But we can't take much more of this." Mark's eyes narrowed as he monitored the incoming fire. The Velari were relentless, but humanity was not so easily broken. The time had come. "Activate the quantum disruptors." Mark's voice was firm, commanding. In that moment, the horizon and the entire Earth fleet unleashed their secret weapon. A pulse of strange, crackling energy surged outward from every ship in the fleet. It was like a ripple in space, a wave of interference that washed over the Velari ships. Their shields flickered, their weapons faltered, and some of their vessels began to spin out of control. The Velari were caught completely off guard. For the first time, their superior technology was useless against the humans. Their weapons failed to fire. Their communications scrambled. The once dominant fleet was now a helpless mass of ships, drifting and disorganized. "It's working," one of the officers shouted in disbelief. Mark felt a surge of triumph, but he knew it wasn't over yet. This was just the beginning. The Velari fleet was scrambling now, trying to regain control, but the quantum disruptors had given humanity the upper hand. The battle was shifting, and the Velari were losing ground fast. "We move in now," Mark said, his voice steady with resolve. "No more holding back. We finish this." As the fleet surged forward, the Velari's confusion turned to panic. Their attempts to regroup were futile. The momentum had shifted entirely in humanity's favor. But Mark knew this was far from the end. The Velari would not accept defeat so easily. They would rally, they would adapt, and they would retaliate. But humanity had one thing the Velari could never match: a burning desire to protect what was theirs, and an unbreakable will to fight back against those who sought to destroy them. And the storm was far from over. The quiet after the initial assault was deafening. Humanity had dealt the first blow, and the Velari fleet had been thrown into disarray. Their advanced ships, once symbols of dominance and technological superiority, were now mere husks of their former selves. The quantum disruptors had crippled their systems, and for the first time, the Velari knew the bitter taste of vulnerability. Mark Harris stood at the helm of the horizon, his gaze locked onto the strategic map. Ships were scattered across the vast expanse of space, drifting like wounded prey. The glow of the Velari fleet's once powerful ships had dimmed, their energy reserves critically low, their firepower nothing more than a shadow of what it had been. "We've broken their formation," Commander Lila Mendoza reported, her fingers tapping rapidly on her console. "But we can't let up now. They're still dangerous, even in disarray." Mark nodded. He had expected the Velari to fall apart after the quantum disruptors hit, but they weren't going to give up that easily. If there was one thing he had learned from his years of command, it was that enemies who underestimated their opponents would often be the ones to suffer the most. "Don't let your guard down," Mark warned. "The Velari will regroup. They always do." At that moment, the silence was shattered by a series of harsh alerts. The deep space sensors on the horizon began to flash, signaling the arrival of something large, something beyond what they had anticipated. "Mark, incoming." The voice of Lieutenant Jameson cut through the tension, his tone filled with alarm. "A massive fleet, more ships, heavier than we've ever seen before." Mark's heart sank. He had known the Velari would call for reinforcements, but he hadn't expected this kind of firepower. From the depths of space, a second wave of Velari ships emerged, far larger than their initial fleet. These ships were darker, more menacing in appearance, their sheer size making them look like the harbingers of doom. The Velari had been holding back. "They'd hidden this fleet until now," Mark muttered under his breath. "They were saving it for this moment." The massive fleet stretched across the starfield like a dark, pulsating mass. Its presence was overwhelming, the sheer number of ships dwarfing the Earth fleet. The Velari had chosen to make their final stand. They've got capital ships, dreadnoughts, Lila said, her voice tight. This is their last push. That's the point, Mark replied, a sudden clarity of purpose taking hold of him. They want to overwhelm us, but they're making a mistake. Mark didn't need to look at the map to know the Velari were underestimating humanity's resolve. The Earth fleet, though smaller, was far more unified. They had endured trials, fought against the odds, and now they had something to fight for, a reason far more powerful than any alien technology. Activate fleet-wide synchronization, Mark ordered. Every ship, every weapon. Coordinate. We fight as one. He had seen this before, during humanity's darkest days, how they had always found strength in unity. This wasn't just a battle of weapons, it was a battle for survival, for the future of humanity. And humanity had fought too hard to be brought down now. As the ships prepared to engage, Mark couldn't help but remember the words of the Velari commander. The ones who had mocked humanity, called them outdated, primitive. They had assumed that their superiority would crush the humans without effort. Now they were facing the full weight of humanity's resolve. The first volley of fire came from the Velari dreadnoughts, their weapons crackling with destructive power. But humanity was ready. Earth's ships weaved and maneuvered with precision, dodging incoming fire and returning fire with an intensity that sent shockwaves through the Velari lines. But the Velari were relentless. Their dreadnoughts loomed overhead, their sheer mass cutting through space like a storm. The Earth fleet was holding its ground, but it was clear that the tide was beginning to shift. The battle was far from over, and the Velari were not backing down. They would fight until the last ship was destroyed. Mark, we've got a problem, Lila said urgently. The Velari have activated their superweapons. If they hit us with those, we're done for. The Earth fleet's shields flickered as a massive pulse of energy erupted from one of the Velari capital ships. The blast sent tremors through the entire fleet, causing the horizon to shudder violently. Shields holding, Lieutenant Jameson called out, but his voice lacked confidence. Barely. We need to hit them first, Mark said, his mind racing. He needed a plan, a way to turn the tide before the Velari unleashed their full might. Prepare the quantum wave disruptors, he ordered. We can't wait any longer. It's time to finish this. The quantum wave disruptors were humanity's secret weapon, the key to disabling enemy fleets on a massive scale. The last time they used it, the Velari had underestimated it. This time, Mark was determined to make them pay for every single mistake they'd made. Outside, the Velari fleet was closing in, their weapons charging, their final attack about to unfold. The Earth fleet was battered, but not broken. Mark's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the Velari ships align for a devastating barrage. This was the moment. There would be no turning back. The first super weapon blast from the Velari ships tore through space, heading straight for the horizon. But Mark wasn't going to let them have it. With a single command, he launched humanity's final countermeasure. Quantum wave disruptors, fire. The shockwave from the disruptors tore through space, a wave of energy cascading outward like a tsunami. The Velari ships nearest to the blast zone were engulfed, their shields disintegrating under the force. The massive weapons they had relied on to crush humanity were neutralized in a flash. For the first time, the Velari were truly vulnerable. The battlefield was shifting, and humanity had taken the upper hand. But the Velari were not out yet. They would fight back with everything they had. Mark tightened his grip on the control panel. Now, we finish this. The tension in the control room was palpable. The Earth fleet had made its stand, unleashing humanity's most powerful weapon. For a moment, it seemed as though victory was within their grasp. The Velari fleet had faltered, their advanced weaponry turned against them by the quantum wave disruptors. Yet Mark Harris knew better than to think the battle was over. The Velari were ruthless, and they still had the advantage of numbers. If they were going to win, they needed to stay one step ahead. The horizon shook violently as another wave of fire tore through space. The shields flickered but held, a testament to the durability of Earth's technology. Outside the ship's viewing window, Mark saw the chaos unfolding. Velari ships retreating and regrouping, but there were still too many left. "They're retreating. For now," Lila Mendoza reported, her voice calm but tinged with uncertainty. "But it won't be long before they regroup and strike again, and we don't have the firepower to match them now." "Not with conventional weapons, no," Mark replied, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the tactical readouts. "But we don't need to match them. We need to break their will to fight. If we can hit them hard enough, they'll fall apart." A deep silence filled the room as the crew of the Horizon processed Mark's words. Humanity had been underestimated from the beginning. The Velari thought that with their superior technology and fleet, they would crush Earth's forces in a matter of hours. They had been wrong. Humanity's resilience, its sheer will to survive, had kept them in the fight long enough to prove that there was more to victory than just technology. But the real test was still ahead. Mark tapped a few commands on his console, bringing up a holographic map of the Velari fleet. The ships were regrouping, moving toward the center of their formation. They were preparing for one last massive offensive, a final strike that could wipe out humanity's forces in one fell swoop. "This is it," Mark muttered under his breath. "Their last move. We can't just sit here and wait," Lila said, her voice now laced with urgency. "If we don't take the fight to them, they'll destroy us." Mark nodded, a grim determination settling over him. "We'll do it our way. We're not just going to fight them head-on. We're going to cripple their command structure, take out their leaders." The Velari had always relied on their central command to coordinate their operations. Without it, their fleet would fall apart, their tactics useless. Humanity had already shown them the power of coordinated attacks. Now, it was time to take it to the next level. "Get me the fleet," Mark ordered. "Tell every ship to prepare for the Shadow Strike formation. We'll target their command ships. Those are the real threat." The Shadow Strike was a maneuver humanity had developed in secret, a tactical formation that would allow them to hit the Velari fleet where it hurt the most, at its heart. The Horizon and its allies would split into smaller groups, each targeting a different aspect of the Velari fleet's command structure. They would use stealth, precision, and speed to get in and out before the Velari could respond. Mark's plan was risky. It relied on the element of surprise, and the Velari had proven themselves to be adaptable. But it was their best chance. He wasn't about to let humanity's future slip through his fingers now. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the fleet moved into position. Mark could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him, the lives of thousands of crew members in his hands. He glanced at Lila, who was staring at the command console, her fingers moving like lightning. "Are we ready?" he asked, his voice steady despite the turmoil swirling in his mind. "We're ready," she replied, her voice calm but resolute. "On your command." Mark took a deep breath, his mind focused. He had led his crew through battles before, but this was different. This was humanity's last stand, a fight to decide if they would survive or if they would be wiped from the galaxy forever. It wasn't just about defeating the Velari. It was about showing every species in the galaxy that humanity would never be underestimated again. "Execute the plan," Mark said, his voice cutting through the silence of the room. The fleet moved in unison, ships breaking away from the main formation and darting toward the heart of the Velari Armada. Mark watched as the Horizon split off, its engines roaring to life as it sped toward its target. The battle was on, and there would be no turning back. The Velari, caught off guard by the sudden shift in strategy, scrambled to respond. Their fleet, still reeling from the earlier blows, was now vulnerable. The Earth fleet was fast, silent, and deadly. Every ship knew its target, and they struck with precision. As the ships engaged, Mark's heart raced. He knew the Velari would fight back with everything they had, but this time, they were not prepared for humanity's relentless drive to survive. The quantum wave disruptors fired again, and the Velari's command ships began to disintegrate, their once impenetrable shields faltering under the force of humanity's might. Lila's voice crackled through the comms, filled with triumph. "Mark, we're taking down their command ships. Their fleet is falling apart." The sound of explosions and ship-to-ship combat filled the air, but Mark's focus was unwavering. His eyes locked onto the tactical map, watching as the Velari fleet's cohesion began to crumble. Their once pristine formations were now a chaotic mess of ships, scattered and disorganized. It was only a matter of time before the final blow landed. And then, as if in slow motion, a massive explosion ripped through the heart of the Velari fleet. One of their largest command ships, the one leading their final push, was torn apart by a concentrated barrage from Earth's forces. The Velari fleet's morale shattered in an instant, and they began to retreat, their once imposing ships limping away from the battlefield. Mark let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The battle was won. Humanity had proven once again that they were not to be underestimated. "Victory is ours," Mark said quietly, though his voice carried a weight of relief and exhaustion. "But this war isn't over. We've shown them our strength, but we'll need to rebuild. We'll need to make sure this never happens again." As the Velari ships retreated into the depths of space, the Earth fleet stood victorious. Mark knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy had seen humanity's true power, and no one would forget the day the Deathworlders decided to stop pretending to be civilized. The stars outside the horizon had grown eerily quiet. The once chaotic battlefield, filled with the hum of interstellar combat and the terrifying roar of weapons, now lay silent. The Velari fleet had retreated, their ships fleeing into the vast unknown. Humanity's victory had been hard-won, but the cost had been high. The battle was over, but the war was far from finished. Mark Harris knew that this was not a moment to rest. The price of their triumph was just beginning to unfold. The crew of the Horizon had seen the aftermath of the battle. The debris from the Velari ships littered the area around them like the remnants of a war they had fought hard to win. But for every ship that had fallen, there were human lives lost as well. Mark's eyes swept over the control room, his gaze lingering on the faces of the crew. They had done it. They had proven humanity's strength to the galaxy, but it had come at a cost. "We won," Lila Mendoza said quietly, her voice soft yet filled with the weight of their victory. "But at what cost? Look at the fleet, Mark. Look at the wreckage. We're not coming out of this unscathed." Mark nodded grimly. "No, we're not. But we've sent a message. The galaxy won't forget what we've done here today. They'll remember that when you underestimate humanity, you do so at your peril." Lila turned her gaze to the tactical readouts, her eyes scanning the damage reports. "The Velari will be back. You know they won't just leave it at this. They'll rebuild. They'll come for us again." "We're ready for that," Mark replied. "This battle may be over, but it's just the beginning of humanity's rise." As the crew continued their work, coordinating the aftermath and assisting with the injured, Mark found himself staring out into space. The stars seemed so distant, so cold. And yet, in the silence of space, humanity had found its voice. They had shown the galaxy what it meant to face the wrath of a Deathworlder. But the question that weighed on Mark's mind was whether they would be able to hold onto that strength. Could humanity continue to stand strong against the overwhelming forces of the galaxy, or would this victory become a fleeting moment in history? The day's events had been a whirlwind, a blur of chaos and triumph. But now, with the battle won, Mark had time to think. The Velari had made their mistake. They had underestimated humanity's resolve, its creativity, and its determination to survive. But that was just one enemy. The galaxy was full of others, other species who would no doubt see Earth as a threat, just as the Velari had, and they would come. But humanity had something that no other species could match. They had the fire of survival, the sheer will to keep fighting, no matter the odds. "We've proven ourselves today, but we need to be smarter," Mark said aloud, more to himself than to anyone in particular. "We need to rebuild, regroup, and prepare for the future. We can't afford to rest on our laurels. The galaxy will come for us, and we have to be ready. Lila looked over at him, a determined expression on her face. We will be ready, Mark. We've proven that when we fight together, there's nothing we can't overcome. Mark smiled faintly, but the weight of responsibility still pressed heavily on him. This victory is just the beginning, Lila. We've shown them we're not just another species to be wiped out. Now we have to make sure the galaxy knows who we are, and make sure they never forget what happens when you challenge humanity. The Horizon moved forward, the ship now on course back to Earth, where the people of their home planet would soon learn of their victory. The journey ahead would be long, but the lessons learned from this war would shape humanity's future. They were no longer just Earth's defenders. They were the galaxy's warning. As they traveled through the dark expanse of space, the crew had a moment to reflect on what had been accomplished. Humanity had proven its strength, its resolve, and its ability to fight back when pushed to the brink. The galaxy would now have to reckon with Earth's place in it. No longer would they be seen as primitive or insignificant. No longer would they be underestimated. The fight had just begun. Mark Harris walked down the corridors of the Horizon, past the crew members who were already beginning to prepare for the next mission. His steps were steady, purposeful. He knew what lay ahead, the long road to rebuilding and preparing for the inevitable future battles. The victory over the Velari was significant, but it was only one chapter in the story of humanity's rise. As he reached the bridge, he saw the vastness of space stretched out before him once more. The stars twinkled, silent and distant, yet they held a new meaning now. Humanity was no longer just a small, forgotten species on the edge of the galaxy. They had made their mark, and they had done it with a force that would not be easily ignored. He turned to Lila, who was at the helm, looking out into space. "We've got a lot of work to do," he said, his voice low. Lila turned, her eyes full of determination. "We always do. But this time, Mark, we're not just fighting to survive. We're fighting to thrive." Mark nodded, a sense of purpose filling him. "And we will. We'll make sure the galaxy knows that when humanity is pushed, we don't just fight back. We make them regret ever challenging us." With a final glance at the stars, Mark turned back to the crew and gave the order to continue their journey home. It wasn't over. The war was just beginning, but humanity would face it together.